if I could make like six figures doing this, I feel amazing. I feel like the luckiest person in the world. I just want someone to pay me low six figures to do to do what I want to do and not be
Mhm.
interfered with too much. Now, depending on where you're coming from, that could seem insane. I think insanely high. If you're getting paid $200 for this piece that takes you a week and things like that, it's just like, that's not. But of course, if you look at it from other industries, it's like a lawyer or whatever, they're like, they would look down on that amount of money. It's like, that's your goal? Like, that's pathetic.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Loitering, the occasional but lovable traveling mini pod. I am now currently testing in video podcast format. Although I'm also still offering it as a regular podcast in audio form, and you're probably encountering it via my newsletter, Loitering. And today I am loitering with a very special guest. Can you please introduce yourself?
I'm Evan Ratliff. I'm a journalist. I love to loiter all the time. Catch me loitering all over the place.
Awesome. Yeah, who doesn't love to loiter? Evan, so right now we're speaking less than a week or just about a week before the launch of Shell Game Season 2, which is the podcast you created and developed. The first season was all about the coming, well, the now existing premise we have in our world, which is voice clones. And super excited to talk to you more about that. But part of the reason I also wanted to talk with you is to introduce to journalism students more about you and your work. So just to start, like very briefly, can you walk us through like the contours of your career, just this different stints you did and ventures you pursued?
hmm So I mean, for most of my career, I've been a magazine writer. Basically, that's how I started. So I started working as an intern at Wired magazine many years ago in a different century, and then I was a writer for Wired, and then for other magazines, and then around the late aughts, I guess, I kind of got into like starting other ventures, including I started a magazine called The Atavist, which is a long form magazine. It also had a whole company attached to it that was called Atavist, and we had a software thing. So I was like running the software thing, but also editing the magazine. And then I also co founded a thing called Pop Up Magazine, which was a live show that toured around the country. I was one of the founders, but then like I wasn't one of the people who actually made it a big thing. Although I kept participating in it for a number of years. And then I started a podcast called the Long Form Podcast, which I co-hosted for 12 years or something. And then at a certain point, I left the Atavist magazine and went back to writing and making my own stuff. And then I started another couple of podcasts. One was called Persona, and then the most recent one is called Shell Game. So now I'm sort of like back to being a kind of independent freelance operator, which is what I've been for, I would say, the majority of my career, with this weird stint in between where I was running a company and editing a magazine.
Yeah, and this is super interesting because you've had like a really entrepreneurial career. One of the things I really wanted to discuss with you is like the business models for every single stage of the process. So when you like started freelancing like in 2000, 2001, what was your business model? Like how were you earning a living?
Well, I mean, in those ancient times, like you could earn a better living as a pure magazine freelancer. It's like a little bit of an endangered species now.
Yeah.
Although even when I started, it was already kind of like it was getting close to the like cresting the hill and coming down the other side in terms of like how much money you could make and contracts and staff positions and all that sort of stuff, which is now like more and more, fewer and far between, I guess. But at that time, like when I first started out, I actually did research. Like I helped an author like research a book, and that was like paying most of my bills. And then I wrote magazine articles on the side. So even then, you know, it was kind of piecing together some things. And then for a stretch, I was just a pure magazine freelancer. Like all I did was pitch feature stories to the New Yorker, to Wired, to National Geographic, but National Geographic was paying like $4.50 a word, like out of the
Ooh,
gate
wow.
at that point. So like you could like I got one story for National Geographic and just I was living in really pretty cheaply, like that paid for my whole
Hmm.
year almost. So anyway, then by the time we started Atavist, I was sort of like frustrated that the types of stories that I wanted to do were harder and harder to place, or they were had always been hard to place, but like pure narratives is what I love the most. And they're just not a ton of slots, even at the magazines that run features for those stories. So I decided, well, let's, with two co-founders, like let's start this thing. And then my business model was like I was a salaried employee at our own company. I was actually getting paid not a lot of money,
Wow.
but like a salary. It was the only time I ever had a salary, actually.
Okay,
Um,
this is super interesting. Let me just like backtrack a little bit because also like when you were a freelancer or for like a long time, you were also a contributing writer at Wired. So for the uninitiated, what does it actually mean to be a contributor or a contributing writer? Like, do you get any benefits? Is it like a stipend throughout the year? Is it just like guaranteed publication of your stories?
it's it can be all range of things. If you I mean, the contributing writer or contributing editor label tends to be kind of meaningless because sometimes they put people on there just because they want them on their masthead. This is more in
Hmm.
the old days, like no one even sees the masthead anymore, really. But there'd be all these people in there who hadn't written for the magazine in 10 years, including I stayed on some of them when I I hadn't written for a magazine for 10 years. But the basic range
Interesting.
is like
Okay.
you could have a contract, and even today you can have a contract for a certain number of stories that actually pays you like each month. So basically, they're saying like you're going to give us four stories this year, and we're going to pay you X amount of money, and it's divvied up over. You get a check every month. There's never any benefits. That situation hardly ever includes benefits that I've ever heard of. I've certainly never gotten any benefits, and in that kind of contract, it's like you owe the words or you owe the stories. And if you get to the end of the year and you haven't made it, you just have to keep writing for free because they've paid you the money. They've been paying you the money all along. That's one type. I've only ever had one of those once. That was a long time ago. There's a second kind of contract, which is basically kind of like we're going to formalize the freelance arrangement that you have. So like you're going to write us 3 or 4 or 5 stories a year. We'll pay you this much for each story, but you still like you only get paid once the story's done. It's just like freelancing. It's just like everything's kind of set, and they do want your stories more because they've they've got this contract with you. They're expecting these ideas from you. So it's partly just like a way to make your stories more valuable to them in a sense. Like they want stuff from you, so it's easier than being a pure freelancer when you're on contract and you might be a contributing writer or whatnot. And then there's a sort of like pseudo staff writer position. Like at the New Yorker, they have staff writers who aren't like they're not actually a lot of them on staff.
Yeah.
And I can't remember what their benefit situation is now, but so there's a kind of like full range from like a basically informal thing to like, oh yeah, you're actually getting money every month for, but with an expectation that you're going to deliver stories.
Yeah, yeah. And then so like bringing it now back to the atavis because you were a salaried employee, but also like you got seed money to start it. And so can you like walk us through this process because I think a lot of people be like, "Oh, I want to start my own thing," but how do you go about pitching this to investors?
Yeah, I mean, the different things I've started have all basically started as, hey, with friends, like, what if we made this thing? And they've all started with no money at the beginning, including Atavis. In Atavis, we each put in $5,000, I think, the three founders at the beginning. And then we basically started making it. And then at a certain point, we had made it. And then we went and talked to investors. And then we got money. So for the first like year of doing it, I didn't get paid anything. And then once we got some money, both we were starting to make money, revenues, and we got investor money, which was all very weird because like they were venture capitalists and we had a tech element. And so like it wasn't clear that they really understood the magazine or why we had the magazine or whatever. Anyway,
Yeah.
then there was enough money to get paid, it wasn't, I'll say it's a less than a six figure. It was a 5 figure salary. I mean, wait, am I getting the figures right? How many figures? 5 figures. It wasn't 6 figures.
Well, I guess I'm wondering because it's like, what do you think investors saw in the publication? Like, oh yeah, I want to invest in this because, we have like billionaires investing in journalism here and there, but an entirely new publication, like, and there's also a lot around like rights. Maybe this could be made into a movie. I'm wondering, like, how was all that part of the talk, if at all? And yeah, what did they see in it?
I think, I mean, it's hard to say. There were a variety of investors. I think they had different motivations. I don't know their motivations entirely. I can only glean them from sort of like how they responded, to me and to things that happened. Some of them, very few of them were like, I really want to support journalism, or like, I'm interested in like the media portion of this. Some of them were, but mostly it was a tech. We had a tech platform. We had a platform where other people could come publish stories. So it was like Medium. Like Medium was sort of like the big competitor for it.
Yeah.
So mostly what they saw was, oh, this could be a product that could get a bunch of users and grow, and then like maybe it would go public, or maybe it would sell, or maybe it would start making a ton of money. So they were trying to multiply their investment in that way. Like that's their thinking. Now some of them also, like, they probably invested in us because we had media presences, and like that got us on their radar. Like we had an unfair advantage because like we were already working in the media, and so they may have just thought like, oh, I'll get attention for this, and they also like attention. They want returns, but like, as we can see, if you go on X anytime, you can see that they want attention, many of them. So that was probably part of it too. um and it was like a different time where maybe investing in a media tech startup felt like a better bet than it does now.
Mhm. Yeah, and then now it's, like, under Audiomatic, right? So I'm just, like, curious, like, how do these projects self-sustain? Like, are you privy to that now, or
Yeah, I mean, the magazine now, basically it got bought by Automatic, which is the company that makes WordPress. So the web making software, like, I don't know, used to be like a quarter of the web ran on WordPress, probably still does. So they bought it and they took the technology part and they kind of like folded it into their platform. But then they left the magazine as it is. So the Atavist magazine still publishes 12 long form stories a year, exactly as it has for now, whatever, 15 years. And the way it makes money is both through subscriptions. So they have like a metered paywall, and through deals with like Apple News. Apple News pays to like them to put stuff on Apple News. And I'm not privy to like how much money they make or anything, but my understanding is that they're doing pretty well right now. Like they do quite well for a small publication that's been around this long, that kind of like has built up an audience and can find different ways to make money off that audience. They also do like optioning to Hollywood, selling stories to Hollywood. So that's another way, but that's not a very good way to make consistent money. That's a way to like occasionally make, spikes
Yeah,
of
yeah.
money.
Yeah, and then, like, now in the mix, we have, like, the long form podcast with, Max Linsky and Aaron Lammer. And I'm wondering because it is, like, a cool idea, like, I'm interviewing you right now, people love to interview other writers and creatives, and I'm wondering, like, were you setting out to be like, "Oh, this can be a big podcast that maybe we can have advertising on and make money on," or like, I guess, like, walk us through, like, from the editorial idea to, like, wait, how do we, like, self-sustain this?
Yeah, I mean, this again, like most of these things that I've got involved with don't have any kind of like foresight to them in the way that you're describing. Including, I mean, it's a good example because basically the Max and Aaron, the two guys who ran longform.org, they shared an office with Atavist. So they were like looking for office
Oh.
space, and we had gotten this office that was like a little bit too big. And so they came and worked in our office. And then at a certain point, we would hang out all the time. We were like, podcasts were this is a different era of podcasts. Like the biggest podcast was WTF at the time, but it was still pretty new. And we were kind of like, what if we interviewed writers, kind of in the way that on WTF, Mark Maron, he interviews comedians, and like their backstories are really interesting because when you read something or you hear something, you kind of, you're interested, if you like it, you're interested in like, how did this thing come about? So that was basically the premise. And we said like, let's just do it for a year. We'll just do it every week for a year. We'll talk to people we know, we don't know. We'll do them all in person. We'll do them in this office because we have this office. And if after a year we have no way to make money, or it seems like there's no audience, then we'll just stop doing it. And so that was basically it. And we did very little to spread the word, other than long form had an audience because they did article recommendations. So they put out the word. And then, a lot of journalists, it's fortunate because journalists like that stuff. Journalists
Yeah.
like talk about journalism, so they would spread the word about it, and then we would have increasingly sort of well-known guests like Malcolm Gladwell on the show, and then that would, or Susan Orlean or something, and like that would spread the word because they have fans who just are interested in whatever they do. You know, they're like a bigger presence. And then eventually we started putting ads in it or getting sponsorship, although I never ran any of that part. That was Max. He took care of all the business side. But yeah, eventually it got to a big enough audience where you could sell ads against it. So we did that, but it was never anyone's livelihood. It was always kind of like a sideline, like a hobby
Yeah.
that paid a little money. So
And then so I'm, like, curious because now we're, like, what, like, 2013, 14 era, right? And it's just, like, so you're established, you have a media presence and reputation, but you have, like, all these irons in the fire, like, you're freelancing your own articles, running The Atavist, maybe being a contributing writer at Wired, I think I'm guessing there was also, like, speaking gigs involved, right? Because of your reporting, you got long form, pop-up. So, what was the pie looking like, though, too? Like, in terms of, like, okay, you're surviving as a writer, as a journalist, like, just so people can have a better sense of what was actually going on when no one thing is your livelihood, but what was, like, contributing the most to your livelihood?
yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is it's sort of hard. I have a hard time telling people how best to operate because it's always changing for me. Even today, it's always changing, and it was always
Mhm.
changing at that time. So you would have one year, I'd have one year, like I said, if I did two National Geographic stories and like New Yorker story and a Times Magazine story, like that was my living, like just writing magazine articles. But then sometimes it would shift where I had like a little bit of long form podcast and then my Atavist salary. And then maybe I wrote one story that year. And then get to the end of Atavist and it's sort of like, well, I got a book contract. So like my book contract was big enough that that was my livelihood for 2 years. Like that's all I did was work on the book, which is like an incredible luxury. And then sometimes it's like podcast plus a an option that someone optioned one of my stories for Hollywood, plus a speaking gig that I got. It's just like I view it as kind of like this business. My little business is really like telling the kind of stories that I want to tell and doing kind of journalism that I want to do, and then like finding the different outlets based on how much I can get paid to tell the story that I want to tell, or maybe I'll take less because I can really do a story that I can't do anywhere else. And like, how do I make all those pieces work together so at the end of the year I have made enough money? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
it's
and,
basically like
like,
an ongoing process all the time.
totally, and I'm, like, wondering for you at that time, like, what was enough? Because it does feel like sometimes I think people wonder, is enough, like, what they feel they can attain versus what is actually attainable? You're mentioning pretty prestigious publications too. So did you have, like, a vision or a goalpost that you're like, "No, I gotta reach this?"
No, no, I never had. I mean, my financial goal was like not to go bankrupt. Like that's basically it. And it just varies tremendously on what your circumstances are, what kind of savings you're coming in with or have built up, if any, what your family situation is. So like what I could do when I was in my early 30s, like late 20s, early 30s, when I had no family, I could live cheaply, control my expenses. Like that was different than like I've got two kids now, and a home that like it's just like it's a different amount. So it's for me there was no sort of like I want to be making this. I mean, if you asked me at any point, I would probably just have said like if I could make like six figures doing this, I feel amazing. I feel like the luckiest person in the world. Like that's basically I just want someone to pay me like low six figures to do what I want to do and not be interfered with too much. Now, depending on where you're coming from, that could seem insane. I think insanely high because some people who are freelancing are like, how the hell would you do that? Like, that's like, if you're getting paid $200 for this piece that takes you a week and things like that, it's just like, that's not. But of course, if you look at it from other industries, it's like a lawyer or whatever, they're like, you like, they would look down on that amount of money as like that's your goal, like that's pathetic. But I think like I didn't always make that. I don't always make that today. Like it shifts a lot. And sometimes I make a ton of money in one year and then a very small money in the next year because something shifted to that year and it's like you have enough savings to like make it work out. It's just like uh I mean my overall thing is like you have to be ready for a lot of variability if you're going to take this approach, which I'm not saying I necessarily recommend.
Yeah, I know. I mean, like, I have my own experience, but, I am wondering, like, during this time, during the course of your career, are you ever doing, like, any branded or commercial work during this time? Anything non-journalistic to, like, make ends meet, or are you really just focusing on, like, the journalism?
Just the journalism. I mean, I've never done any commercial thing ever, I don't think. I mean, the closest thing are like speaking gigs where it might be some conference or something and they would pay to like for you to go there and speak. And even those like there's ones that I turned down because I'm like, I don't yeah, I don't know about this organization. but but yeah, no, I've never done any. It's partly like if you never do it, it's not like they're asking me. I don't want to say like I'm so pristine that I'm just turning down all the time. People are like, "We want to pay you 50 grand to like write for American Express." Like they've literally have never asked me. So it hasn't been put to that much of the test. But I really partly just like I really want to focus on doing long form stories and there's a part of me that's always like if I'm doing something else, I should just do that thing because that thing probably pays a lot more money just to do all the time. Now, but I also support like everyone I know. I know many people who do commercial gigs and then there's like one for you and one for me kind of thing. And like you got to do it however you could do it, you know? If that the goal is to like produce some journalism, if you need to do something else, as long as it's not like heinous, heinous, uh I had my friend Wendy McNaughton who came on the long form podcast a long time ago. She used to call it the chicken salad approach, which is like she is an illustrator and she got paid to like draw little chickens on the Whole Foods chicken salad. She would like illustrate and like it paid really well. And she'd be like, I do the chicken salad and then I like do all this amazing artwork for like the New York Times and other places. They don't pay that well. And like that's an approach and I support that approach. I've just partly like I have never even taken the time to like explore the commercial world.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I guess I'm, like, curious because a lot of friends I know, like, in my experience too, it's just, like, if the rates for these publications aren't maintaining, like, 4.50 a word, or I
Oh
heard
yeah, they're
yesterday,
going
like,
down.
$10 a word. Yeah, so actually, like, how do you a how do you justify that? Because I think for some people it's like, "Oh, does this have to be a passion versus it being a source of, like, sustainability, income,
Yeah,
etcetera?"
it's very difficult. And again, it depends on your circumstances and what you can afford and all that. I've just my approach has just been like, of course, like I'll do a variety of things to make money. I want all of those things to be journalism. So my
Mhm.
goal is always to find new, different journalistic projects that I feel fit into what I'm good at and what I want to do that also pay money. So that's why I do podcasts. Like I used to think of myself as just a writer. Like I never did any radio or anything. But like podcasts are like a way to make some money now, not as much money as 5 years ago,
Oh, I know,
fortunately,
oh my
but
gosh, yeah.
you still can. And so like that's one way. If I can tell a great story there and do my reporting and do it the way I want, then I'll do it there. So it's more like combining different types of projects.
Yeah, and, like, how many projects are you working on at once typically?
I mean, I usually have like one that I'm completely focused on and then one in the background. They're pretty involved and I get pretty, obsessive about them, so they become sort of like round the clock things oftentimes. So, I'm not very good at doing 2 large projects at the same time. I generally have to like set one aside and finish one, which again,
And
like financially, you can't always afford that. Like sometimes you got to double track things because like they're both going to pay and they both have deadlines.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And and now I'm like, this kind of brings us more to, Shell Game season 1, and I'm wondering if you tell us more about the origin story for that. Were you just, like, looking to experiment with voice chat bots or, like did you have the idea for the podcast in mind already?
First, I legitimately was just experimenting with it. Like, I had an idea a couple years ago, a couple years before that, I had been messing around with a producer that I was working with on a show. We were messing around with voice cloning and we are like, what can we do with voice cloning? And then I kind of set it aside and I was like bored with AI stuff. And then I don't even remember what, something prompted me to think about it again. And I was sort of like, oh, I wonder how good that stuff is now. And it was 2 years later almost. And it was just so vastly improved. So then I was like, oh, this is fun to mess around with. And so I was messing around with it, and then I was kind of like using it on my friends a little bit, and then it was when I figured out how to like make it call people in my voice with an AI like brain basically, so it could just have its own conversations, and like I just had to call my wife, and like we could not stop laughing. Like there was something so like dystopian, but also just like ridiculous and hilarious. And I was kind of like, I can't believe you can do that. They just let you do this. Like, that
Yeah, yeah,
anyone
yeah,
can do
yeah.
this. And I couldn't believe other people weren't doing it. And so that was the point where that was sort of early 2024, where I was like, oh, I think there's a podcast. There must be a podcast in this. I'm not sure exactly what it is.
Yeah. I mean, and like the idea lends itself to the medium, right? It's because it's all about what you're hearing. It wouldn't really translate on the page in the same way. And I'm wondering because you talk about in the first season that you like were chatting with a podcasting company about doing it for them, but then you ultimately wanted to do it yourself. But then that means you don't have the resources from the podcast company. And so I'm curious, like, what was going on in your mind? Because you mentioned wanting to have creative control. So what did you mean by creative control?
Well, I mean, a thing that I have found, which I think people in, Hollywood are very familiar with, but it's also true in the world of sort of like this type of journalism that's a little more creative and a little more sort of storytelling oriented. Is like the larger the budget for the thing, the more people there are involved. And as the budget grows, the people who are involved become more and more distant from what you're doing, but they still have opinions and things that you are supposed to take into account because they are giving you the money. So, like,
Right,
with
right,
the
right.
money comes the obligation that you at least listen to them about their notes on what you're doing. And so, what I wanted as the kind of idea formed of what we were going to do, and I realized, well, I could find my own producer. I just thought, like, I really want this to be so weird. Like, I don't want it to sound conventional. Not that I'm like so creative that I'm like breaking all the rules or something, but just like I know this is strange and I just want it to be as strange as it can be. And I don't want people giving me notes like, you need to explain like the history of AI. Like you need to do expository this. And I didn't want, you need to say how you feel about AI. Like, how do you use it otherwise? All these things that like later people would ask me. I didn't want to include any of those things. Like, I just wanted to tell the story of messing around with this thing and raise all these questions and actually never answer them. That was my goal. And so, like,
But some people would say, like, in the podcasting, that's not satisfying. We want like a satisfying
yeah,
conclusion.
that's fine. I mean, I'm perfectly happy if people don't like it, if people are like, but I think people who did like it, and a lot of people, they just liked that, like, it felt like maybe just like free, just kind
Mhm.
of like, we don't have to start with the premise that this stuff is bad or good or going to change the world in this or that way. The premise is like, they're telling us this stuff's going to change the world and we're going to check it out and like see what happens. And part of what happens is scary and disturbing. And part of what happens is hilarious and
Yeah.
bizarre.
Yeah.
And so, like, I just wanted to kind of capture all that. And I didn't actually want a lot of voices. Now, I should say, like, season 2, we are working with that same podcast company that I talked about in season 1, and we have a budget, and like, I get really good notes from them. Like, I'm not a person who's kind of like, don't ever work with big media or whatever. It's just like for certain things, I feel like there's more value in just doing it myself if I can afford it and I can get it out there.
Yeah, yeah, and, like, what did the budget for that first season look like? Because like and was it coming out of your own pocket, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, it was coming out
Yeah.
of my own pocket. I think it was 20 grand really overall. part of that was, like, paying my producer, Sophie, but at a lower rate. Like, she took a lower rate than she would normally take to do it. Uh, and then part of that was all these, like, AI services that I had to pay for in order to make it work. So, yeah, that was basically it. It was like, that's coming out of my own pocket, and I had some confidence that I could make it up either in, Substack subscriptions, which we launched it on Substack, which we did ultimately make
Yeah.
up the budget there, and, like, other ways. I just feel like the money will come somehow. That was my that's my
Yeah, yeah,
approach.
yeah, yeah. No, because I remember I saw it on Substack, like, and I was like, "Oh, this is interesting." Because I realized, like, recently I launched my Substack, like, years ago before Substack became part of the zeitgeist, but I never
Mm.
tried to, like, monetize it. I was just like, "Oh, this is something I could do, mess around, and no one's gonna do a podcast on Substack." But tell us more about your approach. Like, were you using Substack as the hosting platform, as a way to give behind the scenes stuff? Like, what were you making in subscriptions? Tell us more about all of that.
Yeah, that was basically the idea. The idea was if we launch it there, that's where it was that's where the feed was hosted, and then they're pretty good. They're not as good as some of the, like, pure audio platforms. They've got a lot of quirks, but because 'cause they're a newsletter organization, really. But you can get it out to Apple and Spotify and all those places directly from Substack. So it's a decent place to launch it. And then also you can do a paid feed. You can do subscribers to the newsletter. You can, like you said, put out, extra stuff. And we did that during the course of season one. But the main thing that we wanted to do was we were making a big thing in the show of the fact that it was completely independent, that we paid for it out of our own pocket, that there was zero advertising that you had to listen to. And that was like our sell for people to kind of be like, if you want to give us some money, like, please do. Like, you don't have to. You get it free either way. But most of the people who subscribed, I don't think they wanted like a newsletter from me that I produced every week. They just wanted to say, like, hey, I like this thing and here's some money. Probably would have been better if they were like single, if you could pay one time rather than subscribe, because some of them got to this subscription renewal and were like, why was I subscribed to this?
Really?
Like, they
Oh,
just wanted to give me some
interesting.
money, for being like, "I really enjoyed this, and,
Mhm.
clearly you don't have advertising, so, like, here's some money." So and that's one model, but I quickly realized, like, I don't wanna run a sub I spent my whole career trying to avoid something like writing every week about AI. So, like, I wasn't gonna maintain it in that way, and I wasn't gonna try to build subscribers in that way. It's basically just around the show.
Yeah, 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 and, like, did you make back that 20 grand that you invested? Like, because, I feel like we have the Substackification of journalism coming up right now, where a lot of people are going to, and I understand why, but also it's like, I'm curious, like, are people making money? Like, how much are they making?
Yeah, we made it back. I mean, I
Ooh.
don't think we quite made the full budget, but about roughly we made the full budget over the course of a year, like amortized over the course of a year. And I mean, the genius of Substack is like it doesn't take that many subscribers to do that. Like like what would be considered for a publication a tiny amount of subscribers, if you multiply it out, like you get to 20 grand, which is why the people who really hustle, who post twice a week and who are posting about something that people really love to get in their inbox all the time, politics, tech, etc., and are good at it, like they can make a ton of money because like if you get 5,000 paying subscribers, it's a huge amount of money. They're paying
Yeah, yeah.
$7 a month or something. So it's
Mhm.
just like, and I could see that vision once we got a few. My problem was, like, I didn't really wanna grow it. Like, I still don't wanna grow it. I mean, I'm happy if people come and pay, but I'm not trying to get people to, like, come every week.
Yeah.
And that's what you have to do. Like, that's
Well,
what
yeah.
makes it work.
Well, this is why Loitering is also the occasional but lovable
Yes.
traveling mini podcast.
Yeah.
I also never wanted to feed the beast, but I like doing this stuff, and I also wonder if people are more prone to open up, their email if it's occasional. I'm also just looking at the time. Do you have to go, like, do you have a hard out?
Yes. Yes.
Oh my
Very
gosh.
hard.
Okay. So let me, like, so first of all, what can listeners expect from the second season? Very, like, briefly, because I do have a couple, like, other questions for you.
Okay, the very brief version of season 2 is, like, in season 1, I cloned myself, and I kind of set it loose on the world. In season 2, I have a series of other AI agents that are not me, that I have assembled as a part of a company, a real company, and I'm documenting what happens when AI agents are set loose to run a real startup.
Wow. Okay. And now finally to wrap up, so last night I was prepping for this and I read that piece that you wrote that was a backstory of how you tried to vanish for Wired.
Mm.
And, the whole thing just struck me as very fun. Like people were tweeting, like trying to hunt you down. They used that hashtag vanish. And Wired had positioned it as a game pretty much. But you were basically doing and kind of playing with these ideas. Like what many people would say and feel is like, these are really frightening possibilities, but it was fun. And the same thing is like true with Shell Game. It's like voice clones talking to each other, etc., talking to a therapist. Like it's frightening, but fun. And I'm wondering, is this something that you've noticed about your work? And how do you balance the fun versus frightening when it comes to these projects that you pursue?
I mean, yeah, that is my I mean, I take that as a very nice compliment because that is what I am trying to do is sort of take issues. They don't always have to be frightening, but in these cases they are a bit frightening, like, privacy and surveillance or AI cloning, how AI is infiltrating society, and kind of like tell a story that will illuminate those questions by engaging in a kind of journalistic experiment. Like that's my approach. And it's partly because there are all types and flavors of journalism. I feel like what I can add is not sort of writing how bad something is. Like I don't feel that connects. I feel what connects is like using the thing or creating a story around the thing or finding a story of other people doing something and getting people hooked into that story in a way that they don't even realize until the end that they've got all these questions and it's like it's emotional for them. Like that's my goal. And so you won't find usually a lot of in my work of me even saying it's frightening. Like I might say offhandedly like that's pretty spooky, but I really am trying to like just tell the story and then let people draw the conclusions themselves. Now, it
Yeah.
varies a bit, but like that's generally what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, and in like those projects and in your other work, you're also writing about the experience of reporting as opposed to just like straight reporting. And I'm wondering what comes out of positioning yourself in the story.
Well, I like that approach. I mean, I was always very into like new journalism. If people know about that, the sort of like 60s and 70s, like Tom Wolfe type of approach. And w- I feel like my life is not very interesting. Like if I wrote a memoir, you wouldn't want to read it. Like it wouldn't be particularly interesting. But I feel like I do have the ability to put myself in strange situations and then try to find my way out of them and tell that story, and it's sort of a way of personalizing it. Like instead of just being, let's say, scared about AI, you're like scared for my friends who are getting called by my voice clone. Instead of being upset at a sort of amorphous idea of like AI in society, some people are like upset at me for like doing that, calling my friends with an AI clone. And it's like, it's just a different way of trying to like pull people into the story. And it's not because I think I'm like that interesting person, truly. It's more just like I feel like I'm willing to kind of like put myself in places that are like borderline like mortifying and then like try to like write my way out of them.
Are there any like final thoughts that you want to say before we officially wrap up? Anything about where journalism is heading, advice for others out there in this world?
I'm terrible with advice because like it's just changed so fast. Like I often say to people who want advice, I just say like, don't take advice from people like me. That's my advice. Like
Mm.
the world was different when I started. And so like I'm not as tuned in to like what it would take right now. But I think a general principle that has worked for me and I feel like it works for a lot of people is to take this entrepreneurial approach where you're like, if I need to, I could do it myself. Like, I don't need their permission to do it. They being editors or institutions, publications. I can either start a publication with friends, I can do a project. Like, there's people, creators that get like 100 times the audience that like anything I do gets. So like you can do it. You can go out there and like create your own audience. So I feel like to embrace both journalistic ideas and that kind of approach is like that's the combination that's worked for me. And but I think it could work even better for people who are coming in who like know the new world of technology, like they know the new platforms. They like video in a way that I don't like video. So that's generally that's my outlook.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. Good luck finishing up the rest of the season. I'm really excited to listen. Um, so that's all we have for today of Loitering, the occasional but lovable traveling mini pod. I am now testing in video podcast format. Thanks for listening and have a great day. Goodbye. Okay.
All right.